Now there is another operation or property, to be precise, related to inserting, deleting, or moving elements, but primarily related to removing and inserting. On HTML elements that you select in your JavaScript code with getElementById or query selector, on such elements, you also have an innerHTML property. And let me show you how that works. In this index HTML file, we got a broad variety of content, as we all know. And now let's say we actually want to change this paragraph, this first paragraph, and we want to change the content that's inside of it. And we actually want to insert a mixture of text and HTML elements. For this, we first of all need to get access to that paragraph, and conveniently we already got access here to first paragraph. It's stored in this variable. Therefore, here at the bottom, I want to show you this innerHTML property, and for that we can use this first paragraph and access the innerHTML property. Now, innerHTML is a bit like text content, where text content gives you access to the, well, text content, so to all the text nodes that are inside of this element, including text that might be in nested elements. innerHTML gives you access to all the HTML content stored in an element. That could be just the text, but it would also include other HTML elements. And to understand this, let me actually console log first paragraph innerHTML here at the end of app.js. And with that added, let's open the developer tools. You now see I get this here in the console. It's a mixture of text, I'm new and this leads to Google, and HTML code. This anchor element is part of this output here. And that's different if we compare it to text content. If I console log the text content of first paragraph, then we get just the text content. As I mentioned, this includes the text content that might be part of nested HTML elements, like this nested link here. And by the way, in case you're wondering why we are in the second paragraph instead of the first one, keep in mind that we moved this paragraph around here. So we are operating on the correct one. So innerHTML contains the HTML elements, and it's mostly useful if we are not using it to read or output the values, though of course we could have use cases for this as well. But it is mostly useful if we instead use it to set some new content with the equal sign, just as we can do it for text content as well. But now we'll do it for innerHTML. Because then here there is a major difference compared to text content. Whereas text content, as the name suggests, wants just text, innerHTML actually takes a string that could also contain HTML code. It can contain text and or HTML code. So here we could say, hi, this is, and then I add a strong HTML element to emphasize the content between the opening and closing tags. And here I put important. If we would use text content to show this first, if we would use text content here, then if I save this, you see this gets displayed as text. It's not interpreted as a HTML element, it's not parsed as such by the browser, and it's therefore not translated into its own DOM object. Strong is not translated into a DOM element. Instead, it's treated as plain text because we did set text content here. But of course, if we know that we want to insert a mixture of text and HTML elements, we can use innerHTML instead. And if I now save this, then you'll notice this is bold because now indeed this was interpreted and parsed as a HTML element. So like all the other elements here. And that's pretty nice to have, because in the end, this means that if you have more complex content that should be inserted, you can do it with innerHTML instead of creating elements with create element and appending them manually as we're doing it up here in this example. On the other hand, doing it like this has the huge advantage that you have all the JavaScript configuration options for the created element. For example, if you want to add an event listener to the new anchor element here, you can easily do that because we create new anchor element here in our JavaScript code anyways, so we have direct access to it. That would be more difficult if you do it with innerHTML. Here you would first have to select this element, for example by giving it an ID and then using getElementById. But if you don't need direct access to the HTML elements which you want to create, then of course you can use innerHTML to just output a mixture of text and or HTML elements. And the HTML code you have in this string can be as complex as you want. Just keep in mind that you're not allowed to add line breaks here, so readability could be an issue if this becomes more complex, and whilst JavaScript has solutions for this as well, we can ignore them for the moment. If you would want a line break here, you could of course add it by concatenating another value. So by adding a plus here and then starting a new line, because in that case a line break would actually be allowed. But that's just some additional knowledge which I wanted to pass on here. The most important takeaway here is that you have this innerHTML property and that you can use it to output some text HTML mixture and force the browser to parse and display it just as it's displaying all the other HTML code that makes up your page.